Welcome, my dear friend. Let everything slow. Everything in the lands between is measured against the Erdtree. Events are dated by it. Territories are described by their distance from it. The whole apparatus of law, death, grace, and hierarchy that this channel spent 8 nights describing in another series runs outward from that one golden thing standing at the center of the world. And there was an age before it, not a vague prehistory, and not a myth the Golden Order tells about itself. A functioning civilization with a capital, a ruling class, a priesthood, a god, and a lord who held the title of Elden Lord long before Godfrey was born on the Badlands, or Marika was anything at all. They were dragons. They ruled this world, and almost everything that survives of them is either buried, crumbling, or sitting in a storm outside of time, waiting for something that is not coming back. Tonight, we begin at the beginning, which is much further back than the Golden Order would prefer. What came before? In the prehistoric era, eons before the age of the Erdtree, the lands between were ruled by the ancient dragons. That sentence is stated plainly in the game's own material rather than inferred, and it deserves to be taken at full weight. The world had an owner before the greater will threw its golden star at it. That owner had a seat of power, an army, subjects, and a system. The ancient dragons were immortal, not long-lived, not durable. Immortal in the sense that death did not arrive for them by ordinary means, and their descendants would remember that inheritance long after losing it. They were also enormous, armored in scales that turned nearly anything, and armed with lightning. Red lightning, primeval, older than any sorcery the Academy would later teach. That distinction matters and will return. The lightning the dragons wielded in their own age is a different and older thing than the golden lightning their diminished descendants carry now. Their capital was Farum Azula, a royal city, and their lord ruled it from a seat that this series will spend a whole night on. The Beastmen. A ruling class implies somebody underneath it, and the dragons had a priesthood. In the catacombs beneath Farum Azula, statues show an ancient dragon surrounded by beastmen dressed as clergy. That single detail establishes the shape of the whole society. These were no mere powerful animals holding territory. They were worshipped formally by a subject people who maintained rights on their behalf. The beastmen of Farum Azula wield weapons clad in lightning, and they guard the city still. Their kin are found across the lands between, diminished and scattered, and the ones who remain up there are described as chosen guardians, rather than as inhabitants. Weigh what that arrangement means. The age before the Erdtree had a state religion, a clergy, sacred sites and ceremonial armaments, and the object of that religion was a species that could be met, seen, and spoken to. The Golden Order that replaced it worships something that has never appeared in the world at all. Placidusax, Elden Lord, now the figure at the center, and the fact about him that reframes the entire setting. Dragon Lord Placidusax was Elden Lord. Not a lord, not a king in some looser sense. The title. The same office Godfrey held, the same office Radagon held, the same office that every demigod in the Shattering is killing their siblings to obtain, was held by a many-headed dragon in an age before the Erdtree existed. He ruled from Farum Azula, and above every other dragon in the world stood him. He had 5 heads once. The number was not decorative. His 5 heads corresponded to the 5 fingers of intelligence granted to beasts in ancient times. and 4 fingers were considered a sign of good luck in that reckoning. By the time anyone alive can reach him, he has 2, and the story of how he lost the others belongs to a later night. Sit with the implication of an Elden Lord who is not human, and who predates the Golden Order. The office is older than the order that awards it, which means the Elden Ring's arrangement, the vessel and the consort, the god and the lord who wields the ring on the god's behalf, was running in this world under an entirely different management before Marika was crowned. The Golden Order presents its structure as the natural shape of things. The structure is a tenancy, and Placidusax is the previous tenant, still sitting in the property. The god who fled. Every Elden Lord serves a god. Placidusax was no exception, and this is where his story becomes the strangest in the setting. His god left. The wording preserved about him is flat and devastating. Once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await its return. Nothing explains the departure. No account names the god describes it, or gives a reason for its going. What is recorded is the fact of the absence and the response of the Lord left behind. He did not seek a new patron. He did not declare himself free of the arrangement, or convert his rule into something that could survive without the god at the top of it, or make terms with whatever came next. He withdrew to his seat at the heart of a storm beyond time, and he waited. He is still waiting. A tarnished who finds the way up there in the 41st age of this world's misery finds an ancient dragon in a pocket of ruined sky, holding a post that stopped having a purpose before the Erdtree was planted. 2 heads turned upward. There is a detail about how he waits that players noticed early, and that the game does nothing to discourage. Placidusax's 2 remaining heads face the sky. Set that beside the 2 fingers described at length in this channel's Outer God series. Pale, blind, jointed wrongly, kept in chambers, moving in gestures that only a trained reader claims to understand, transmitting the will of a power that has not sent a signal in an age. A dragon with 2 heads raised toward an empty sky, waiting for a god that fled, is doing something that rhymes uncomfortably with that. Whether Placidusax is attempting to commune, or merely looking, or performing a posture that meant something when the god was still there, can't be established. The game presents the image and declines to explain it. What the image establishes for this series is the pattern. The Lands Between has now produced 2 separate cases of a servant left at a post by a power that stopped answering, and one of them is a dragon in the sky, and the other is the entire Golden Order. Farum, Azula. The capital deserves its own account, because what has happened to it is unlike anything else in the setting. Farum Azula is falling apart, and has been for a very long time. The old texts say it has been slowly crumbling since time immemorial, which is a phrase that does real work. Nobody living remembers a period when it was whole. It hangs in the sky, ringed by storm, its stone breaking away in slow motion. Fragments of it drift. Whole sections have fallen, and pieces of the city are found scattered across the surface of the Lands Between, at roughly equal distance from where it once stood, which suggests something threw them there rather than that they merely dropped, and it has stopped being a city. The old records call it a giant mausoleum enshrining an ancient dragon, guarded by chosen beastmen who wield weapons clad in lightning, a capital converted into a tomb for a lord who is not dead, staffed by a priesthood serving a religion whose object has withdrawn, orbiting slowly outside of time in a storm that has no end. What an immortal society looks like. Something about the ancient dragons deserves examining before we go further, because immortality shapes a civilization in ways that are easy to state and hard to imagine from the inside. They did not need to reproduce urgently. They did not need succession or inheritance law, or any of the machinery a mortal society builds around the problem of one generation handing power to the next. A dragon who held a position held it, and the question of who came after did not arise, which explains something the records mention without comment. The ancient dragons maintained Placidusax's favour by relinquishing their sleep to him and remaining awake. Take that at face value. The currency in that court was rest, rather than gold or land or service in any ordinary sense. A dragon demonstrated loyalty by giving up its own sleep so that its lord could have it, and stayed awake, and the arrangement continued for as long as immortal creatures can continue anything. That is a society organized around a resource no mortal culture would recognize as one, and it produced one weakness in particular, which the same records name outright. The dragon's immortality robbed them of the ambition and fierceness of spirit needed for certain things. And when a crisis arrived that required someone to act rather than endure, the ancient dragons found they had lost the capacity. Creatures that cannot die stop needing to hurry. Given enough time, they stop being able to. What the Golden Order kept. The replacement of one order by another is rarely total, and the Erdtree's people inherited more from the dragons than they would admit. Lightning is the clearest case. The ancient dragons wielded red lightning, primeval and old. The Golden Order's own faithful call down lightning too, in gold, through incantations taught by its clergy, and the connection between the two is neither hidden nor discussed. The dragon's descendants in the age of the Erdtree are weak to the primeval lightning wielded by their forebears. The old thing hurts the new thing. That fact sits in an item description, and it says a great deal about what happened between the two ages. The beastmen persist too, scattered across the lands between, no longer priests of anything, reduced from a clergy to a nuisance encountered in ruins, and the office itself persisted, which is the largest inheritance of all. Elden Lord was Placidusax's title before it was Godfrey's. The Golden Order did not invent the arrangement it governs by. It moved into it. How much of this is known? A caution belongs here, and it applies to the whole series. Almost nothing about that first age survives as history. What survives is item descriptions, statuary, architecture, and the physical evidence of a city falling out of the sky. There are no chronicles. No scholar in the lands between has written an account of the Dragon Age that anyone can consult. The Academy of Raya Lucaria studies stellar matter, and the Golden Order studies its own doctrine, and neither has produced a history of the people who held this world first, which is itself informative. A civilization that ruled for eons and left no readable record either did not write, or wrote in a form nobody has recovered, or had its record destroyed. The Golden Order has form for the third option. This channel's series on the outer gods described how thoroughly it erased an Empyrean it disapproved of, to the point where scholars still argue about whether she existed. An entire preceding civilization would be a larger job. It would also be a more necessary one, for an order whose central claim is that its arrangement is the natural shape of the world. Where this series is going, before we close the first night, the shape of what follows. Tomorrow we climb into the storm beyond time to look at Placidusax himself, the 5 heads, the wound, and what it means to hold a post for an age after the post stopped existing. Then to Bayle the Dread, the dragon who betrayed his own lord, tore 2 heads from him and fled into a realm of shadow to become something worse than he had been. Then to Dragon Communion, and the thing this series finds most uncomfortable, the practice of humans eating dragon hearts to become dragons themselves did not begin as human ambition. It began as a weapon, aimed by a wounded king at a traitor's bloodline, and the humans who take it up now are carrying out an old order they have never heard of. Then to the war itself, the day Grandsax brought down the walls of Leyndell, which is the only time in recorded history those walls have fallen, and what the Golden Order did afterward. Then to Fortissax, and a friendship between a dragon and a god's son that survived the war and outlasted the son's death. And at the last, to the question that has been sitting in this part since the phrase about the god who fled, whether the ancient dragons were a fallen civilization or the first draft of an arrangement that is still running. The dragons in the rock. One more thing about the city, and it is the image this part ends on. In Farum, Azula, between the Beastman's catacombs and the surface of the city, many ancient dragons are found buried in the rock. Their bodies are still filled with gold. They are not fossils and they were not interred. The ancient dragons protected their lord during his slumber by becoming a wall of living rock. And what a tarnished walks past in those tunnels is that wall. Dragons who turn themselves into masonry around a sleeping king and stayed that way. Consider the loyalty involved and the length of it. Immortal creatures gave up movement and sight, and whatever an immortal dragon does with its time, in order to be a wall around a lord who was expecting a god back and never got one. Some of them are visible. A limb here, a head there, still recognizable in the stone. And when an ancient dragon does die, the gold goes out of it. The tinge fades, the body reverts to inanimate stone, and then it crumbles away, which means the ruins of this civilization are being erased by the same process that took its city. Sleep well. Tomorrow we go up to the storm beyond time, and we look at the Lord himself. Getting to him is difficult on purpose, and the difficulty is part of what he means. A tarnished who wants to stand in front of the Dragon Lord must reach crumbling Farum Azula, which sits at the far end of the game's road, and then find a rift in a ruined balcony that nothing signposts, and then lie down in it. That is the mechanism. You lie down on the stone, in one particular spot, and the world takes you somewhere else. What is on the other side belongs to the lands between in no ordinary sense. A flat expanse under a sky of moving cloud, ringed by storm, with columns of lightning walking across it at intervals. The old texts call it the storm beyond time, and nothing about the geography of the lands between accounts for it. Tonight, we look at what is waiting there. 5 heads. Start with the body, because the body is a record of everything that happened to him. Last night established what his crowns of heads signified in the reckoning of that age. What matters tonight is the subtraction. He has 2. An object survives from his own reign, the old Lord's talisman. and it shows him with 4 and with both sets of wings. So the count came down in stages rather than all at once, full at the height of his rule, 4 by the time that talisman was made, 2 by the time any tarnished can stand in front of him. The first head went missing without explanation. Nothing in the surviving material accounts for it, and the game offers no theory. The other 2 have a cause, and the cause has a name that gets its own night in this series. What is left of him? The physical description of Placidusax, as he is now, deserves stating with precision, because the game is unsparing about it. He is quadrupedal, with 2 wizened heads, on a grievously wounded body of gravel-coloured stone. The scales protecting his head and back have been drained of colour. Only the ones on his underbelly still hold the vibrant gold that marks a living ancient dragon. Each of his 2 remaining faces has yellow eyes, paired crown horns, and a large horn on the snout, and long strands of white hair run down the full length of both necks. Set that against what the first night of this series established about his kind. A living ancient dragon carries gold inside it, and death drains that colour away until nothing is left but lifeless rock, which then falls apart. Placidusax is most of the way through that process while still alive. The colour has left everything except his belly. He is turning into the wall his subjects became, from the outside in, and he has not stopped. Where the missing heads went. There is a detail about the lost heads that the game does not put in any text, and that anybody willing to explore can find for themselves. 2 of the Dragon Lord's heads and parts of their necks are still attached to the thing that took them. They can be found on the body of Bayle the Dread, in the realm of shadow, still biting into the drake's neck. Consider what that image records. Whatever happened between those 2, it did not end with a clean separation. Placidusax lost the heads while they had hold of his attacker, and the attacker got away with them, and neither party has removed them in all the time since. Bayle carries the wound and the evidence of it. Placidusax carries the absence, and there is a further piece of him lying around. Part of a dragon's body, an arm, a wing and a head can be seen protruding from a mass of rock in Farum, Azula, before a tarnished ever reaches his arena, and it resembles him. The post he is holding. Now to the thing he is doing, which is nothing, and why that is the most significant act in this part of the setting. The line about his abandonment was given last night. Tonight the grammar of it repays a closer look, because the choice of verb is doing something. The text says he continued to await. Not that he resolved to wait, or chose to, or began waiting when the god departed. Continued. The waiting was already the activity, and the departure removed the point of it without interrupting it, and the sentence records that continuity as though it were unremarkable. A second oddity sits in how he is described. The title given to him is the ancient king whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time, in the present tense, in an age where his capital has fallen out of the sky and his species has been ground down to hunted stock. Only the phrase about his lordship is put in the past. Somebody composing that description considered his kingship a live fact and his office a historical one. He withdrew to his seat, and he has been there since. The Erdtree was planted, an age rose and lasted. The queen was crowned and shattered her own ring. A war consumed the lands between and burned itself out. and none of it reached the storm beyond time or required him to do anything about it. Why the fight feels wrong. Anybody who has faced him will have noticed that the encounter is unlike the others, and the reasons are structural. He does not come to the tarnished. There is no arena to walk into, and no boss fog to push through. You lie down in a rift and arrive in his presence, and he is already there, and he was there before you and will be after. He does not speak. Many of the great figures of the lands between have something to say to whoever reaches them. Placidusax has nothing, and the silence reads less like hostility than like a creature for whom the arrival of one more small thing is beneath the threshold of comment, and he is optional. That is the part that carries the most weight. A tarnished can complete the whole journey, take the throne, mend or break the Elden Ring, and end this world's age without ever learning that a previous holder of the title is sitting in the sky above the last region of the game. The Golden Order does not mention him. Nobody at the Round Table Hold brings him up. No quest line leads there. The former ruler of the world is a thing you find by lying down in the right patch of rubble, or never find at all. What his body is worth. An unpleasant detail belongs here, and it fits the pattern this series has been building. His scales have time-altering properties. Weapons treated with them become capable of slaying a god. Put that beside what the lands between does with dragons as a whole, which the coming nights cover in full. A fallen power is only half of what the dragons are. They are a resource, and the Golden Order's people have been harvesting them for a long time, and the most valuable material in that harvest comes from the Lord himself. A tarnished who defeats Placidusax receives his remembrance, which can be exchanged for his own ruinous lightning or for a weapon. That is what an age of the world converts into at the end. The last king of a species that ruled before the Erdtree becomes an upgrade. What the beast bones mean. The arena he sits in has a detail on the floor that answers a question nobody thought to ask. There are bones scattered around him. Beast bones in some quantity, and among them a beastman's skeleton lying with the Lord's rune. Work out what that scene records. Beastmen came up here. They made the same journey a tarnished makes, into a rift in a balcony, into the storm, in search of something. One of them arrived carrying a rune of lordship, which is not a thing a supplicant brings by accident. They were looking for a king. Their own capital was crumbling. Their god was gone. The world below had been taken by an Erdtree, and a queen who had no use for them, and a clergy without a god went up to ask the last authority they recognized to be that authority again. He killed them. The bones are the answer they received, and the one with the rune had come to offer the office to somebody, whether to Placidusax as a plea to take up his crown again, or to some replacement they had in mind. The scene does not settle. Either way, the request reached a creature who had stopped participating, and the creature responded the way he responds to everything now. Nobody came for him. Something is missing from the Golden Order's treatment of the Dragon Age, and the absence is louder than a persecution would have been. They did not finish him. The order that hunted the ancient dragons across every region below, that made war on them and celebrated the war in its own monuments, that turned dragon hearts into a sacrament and dragon scales into materials, never went up into the storm to remove the last king of that species. Several readings are available. Perhaps they could not. The path there is not a path, and a god who withdrew a whole capital into a pocket of storm may have left it beyond reach of anyone the Order could send. Perhaps they did not know. Farum Azula is visible in the sky, and its ruin is famous, and the rift on the balcony is not. Or perhaps there was no need. A king holding a post over nothing, in weather that does not touch the world, is no threat to an order that has already taken the world. Leaving him there costs nothing and disturbs nobody. The lands between offers no answer, and the practical outcome is the same in every case. The previous ruler of this world was never deposed, never killed, and never surrendered. He was left where he was. The weather he sits in. One more feature of that place deserves attention, because it is the strangest piece of geography in the game. The storm has no source and no edge. Cloud moves across the sky above him in a permanent rotation, and columns of lightning walk the ground at intervals, and none of it comes from anywhere or goes anywhere. The phrase attached to it is beyond time, and the game means that as a description, rather than as a flourish. This is not a distant region of the lands between. It sits outside the sequence that everything else in the setting occupies, which explains something about him that would otherwise need explaining. An immortal creature waiting for a god across an unmeasurable span should show the effects of that span, and he does, in the drained scales and the wounds that never closed. But the Erdtree's whole age passed without touching him, and a place that stands outside time is the only arrangement in which that could be true. He is not enduring the weight. He is suspended in it, in weather of his own, at the heart of something that will not move on until somebody comes and ends it, which a tarnished can do by lying down on a piece of rubble that nothing marks. The two kings. We close by putting him beside the arrangement that replaced him, because the comparison is the reason this series exists. Marika was made a god by the greater will and given the Elden Ring. Godfrey was made her lord and given the task of wielding it. When the greater will withdrew its favour from Godfrey, his grace went out, and he was driven from the lands between, and the office passed to Radagon. Placidusax served a god that did not withdraw its favour. It left entirely, and took nothing back, and made no arrangement for what came after. Godfrey lost his position, and was exiled and came back for it. Placidusax kept his position and lost the world it applied to, and has not moved. 2 Elden Lords, 2 abandonments, 2 responses, and the older of the 2 is still sitting up there in his own weather, on a seat that no longer overlooks anything, with the gold going out of him a scale at a time. Sleep well. Tomorrow we go to the one who took his heads. Last night ended with a king holding a post in a storm, missing most of his heads, waiting for a god that has not come. Tonight belongs to the one who took them. He is called Bayle the Dread, and of all the creatures in this world, he is the only one who ever tried to take the Dragon Lord's place by force. He failed. He also succeeded enough to change everything that came after, and the arrangement that grew out of his failure is still running in the lands between today, carried out by humans who have never heard his name. One of them. Start with the fact that gets lost in his reputation. Bayle was one of the ancient dragons, not an outsider, not a lesser thing that clawed its way up, and not a creature from somewhere else. He belonged to the immortal ruling species described on the first night of this series, in the age when they held the world. Under the Lord they all served, which makes what he did a betrayal in the strict sense. He was inside the arrangement and he broke it. What he wanted is stated plainly enough: the Dragon Lord's title. He moved against Placidusax, intending to take his place at the top of a hierarchy he was already near the top of. And here the first night's observation about his kind becomes relevant in a way that is easy to miss. The opening night set out what deathlessness had cost his kind. The drive was gone, and when a moment came that called for movement instead of patience, they no longer had it in them. Bayle had not lost it. Whatever else he is the only ancient dragon in the recorded history of that species who wanted something badly enough to move. What happened between them? The fight ended in stalemate. Neither of them won. Neither of them died. What both of them got was maiming on a scale that neither has recovered from across every age since, and the shape of that outcome tells you how evenly matched they were. Bayle came out of it having lost both of his winged arms, the pair of wings on his back, and his left leg. Take that inventory seriously. A dragon's capacity to fly is its most basic advantage, and Bayle lost every part of himself that provided it in one engagement, and kept living. He fled to the jagged peak afterward, and he has stayed there. Neither party has ever finished the matter. The two of them have been carrying each other's wounds for an unmeasurable span, in separate places, without either seeking a second engagement. What he did on the mountain, what Bayle became on that peak, is the part of his story that puts the word dread in his name, and it has nothing to do with the fight. Bayle is the forefather of the drakes. The drakes are the lesser dragons that are tarnished meet everywhere in the lands between. Two-winged, smaller, weaker than the ancient dragons by an enormous margin, and considered debased by everything that remembers what the old dragons were. They are his brood. Every one of them descends from him, and he has been eating them. The accounts of what happens on the jagged peak are direct about it. Bayle brutally cannibalizes his own descendants, killing the drakes and consuming them, and doing it in ways that the sources describe as savage, rather than merely functional. Consider what that means as a picture of a life. A maimed creature, exiled to a mountain, unable to fly properly, surrounded by his own children, has been surviving on them for an age. There is no strategy in it that anyone has identified. He is not building strength for a return match. He is not preparing anything. He is on a peak, eating his own line, in the crater of a mountain, and he has been doing that for longer than the Golden Order has existed. Where the mountain ended up, an accident of geography did something to Bayle's situation that nobody planned, and it is worth marking. The jagged peak now sits in the realm of shadow. When Bayle challenged his lord, that land was still part of the lands between. The split came later, when Marika sealed the land of shadow away behind a veil, and whether Bayle's mountain was included on purpose or happened to fall inside the boundary by chance is not something the game establishes. Either way, the consequence is the same. The realm of shadow is described as a place where death flows to and not from, and Bayle has been sitting inside that condition ever since it was imposed. The Golden Order sealed away a realm for reasons of its own, and one of the things it sealed in was the last great enemy of the previous age, which it may not have known was there. the ones who followed him. He was not alone in the rebellion, and the evidence for that is written into a weapon. The ancient dragons who sided with Bayle against Placidusax wielded branching red lightning. That detail comes from an item description, and it establishes that the betrayal was a faction rather than an individual act. Some portion of the immortal ruling species backed the challenger, fought on his side, and used a distinguishable form of the old lightning while doing it. Ancient dragon Fortissax, found on the jagged peak before the summit, is likely one of them. A dragon who chose Bayle over the Lord and is still on that mountain, which converts the story from a duel into a civil war. The species that ruled this world split against itself in the age before the Erdtree, and the split was never resolved. It was interrupted by both leaders being wrecked at the same moment. And that unresolved war is the state the dragons were in when the Erdtree arrived. Placidusax's answer. The Dragon Lord's response is the hinge of this whole series, and tonight we state it and defer the detail to the next part. He could not finish Bayle himself. His own wounds saw to that, and so did the departure of his god, and so did whatever else was going wrong in Farum Azula. So he used somebody else. Placidusax marked Bayle and his bloodline for death, and had his followers shepherd humanity into hunting the drakes, and the reward those hunters were offered was the power in a dragon's heart. That is where dragon communion comes from. The entire practice, the churches, the incantations, the men who eat dragon hearts to become dragons, began as a wounded king's instrument of revenge aimed at one traitor's descendants. Tomorrow follows that instrument into what it became. Tonight it is enough to note that it was aimed, and at whom, and by whom. Egon. This chapter of the story has a mortal in it who belongs nowhere else, because he is the human answer to what Bayle is. Egon is a drake warrior found on the jagged peak, and Bayle left him broken in body and in spirit. He is missing limbs, he can barely move, and he is not stopped in any sense that matters. What remains of Egon is an obsession with killing the thing that ruined him, sustained past the point where his body can carry it. His cursing of Bayle is among the most memorable dialogue in the game, delivered with a fury that no other character in the lands between reaches, and it is the fury of a man who has nothing left except the intention. Set him beside Bayle, and the parallel is deliberate. Both are maimed, both lost the fight that defined them, both refused to stop wanting the thing that fight was about. One is a dragon on a mountain eating his own children, and the other is a man who cannot walk, waiting to be summoned one more time. A tarnished can call Egon into the fight. He arrives in spirit and gets what he has been waiting for. The heart he leaves. One last detail, and it separates Bayle from every other great enemy in the game. He does not drop a remembrance. Every legend in the lands between leaves one, and it can be carried to a finger reader and exchanged for a weapon or a spell. That is the standard arrangement, and this channel described it in the Renala series and again in the Outer God series. Bayle leaves the heart of Bayle instead. It cannot be taken to a finger reader. It cannot be spent for runes. It must be carried to the grand altar of dragon communion and consumed there. Note what that difference encodes. A remembrance is processed by the Golden Order's apparatus, translated by the Greater Will's interpreter into something usable. Bayle's heart cannot enter that system at all. It belongs to the older arrangement, the one Placidusax set running. and the only place it can be redeemed is the altar of the practice built to destroy him. The traitor's heart goes to the institution created to hunt him. That is the last move in a war that began before the Erdtree, and it is completed by a stranger who was not born when any of it happened. What the Drakes are. Bayle's descendants deserve their own account, because most players kill dozens of them without ever learning what they are looking at. A Drake is a lesser dragon. 2 wings attached to the arms rather than a separate pair on the back, smaller frame, no gold in the body, and none of the immortality that defined the ancestors. They are found across the whole of the lands between, in Caelid, in Liurnia, in the ruins, guarding nothing in particular. They are also, by the reckoning of everything that remembers the old age, debased. The word attached to them in the old text is not neutral. Whatever the ancient dragons were, the Drakes are the diminished version, and the diminishment traces back to their forefather. A wrinkle complicates the picture. The Drakes of the Jagged Peak are described as having inverted scales, and those scales look a great deal like the gravel-coloured stone of the ancient dragons, which suggests that Bayle's own immediate brood, the ones on his mountain, sit closer to the old bloodline than the scattered Drakes elsewhere. If that is right, then the Drakes at tarnished kills in Limgrave are a long way down from what Bayle produced, and the ones on the peak are what his line looked like before the distance opened up. Fire and lightning, together. Bayle's power is worth marking because it belongs to nobody else. The ancient dragons wielded lightning. That was established on the first night, and it runs through everything about them. Bayle wields lightning and fire at once, combined, and when he breathes, the attack carries both. The Drakes inherited the fire. Their obsession with it survives even their own deaths. Ghost flame Drakes in the realm of shadow are described as retaining that fixation after the flesh has rotted off them. Nobody has explained where the fire came from. The ancient dragons do not have it. Bayle does, and his line does, and the trait separates his branch of the species from the one that stayed loyal as cleanly as any heraldry could. And there is a technical detail that lore readers have noticed. Bayle's incantations require pure arcane to cast, while Placidusax's require pure faith. Faith is the currency of a servant. Arcane belongs to blood and to old buried things. 2 dragons, 2 powers, and the mechanism the game uses to hand them to a player quietly records which of them served a god and which of them wanted a crown. The war that never ended. We close by naming the situation, because it has been running underneath everything in this series. The war between Bayle and Placidusax has no conclusion. Neither of them died. Neither surrendered. Neither has moved against the other in an age. The Lord sits up in his own weather with the traitor's teeth marks still in him. And the traitor sits in a crater with the Lord's head still hanging off his neck. And the instrument the Lord aimed at the traitor's bloodline has been running on its own for so long that its practitioners have forgotten who pointed it, and the dragon communion is a partial failure by its own terms. Drakes have been hunted for an age, their hearts eaten, their numbers reduced. Bayle is still alive when a tarnished walks into the realm of shadow. The revenge did not work. It merely became an institution, which means that when a stranger from outside all of this climbs the jagged peak and kills the dread, They complete an order issued before the Erdtree by a king who has stopped speaking to anyone, on behalf of a species that no longer rules anything, against an enemy whose crime nobody alive remembers. Sleep well. Tomorrow we look at what it means that people have been eating these things. There is a practice in the lands between that a tarnished can take up within the first hours of the game, and almost nobody who takes it up understands what they are participating in. You kill a dragon. You take its heart. You carry the heart to an altar, and you kneel, and you eat it, and something of what the dragon was passes into you. Last night established where the instruction came from and who issued it. Tonight follows that instruction forward, what it turned into after an age of running, and what it does to the people carrying it out. The two places. Dragon Communion has two sites in the lands between, and both of them are ruins. The first sits on an isolated island off the west coast of Limgrave, reachable only by walking through a cave and coming out the far side. Inside the church is the corpse of an ancient dragon, and in front of the corpse an altar. That is the whole of it. A dead god of the old age lying in a building, with a place to kneel where a supplicant can reach it. The second is a broken down cathedral in southern Caelid, larger and more complete in what it offers, and guarded. Banished knights patrol its grounds, wielding draconic powers, still holding a post at an institution whose leadership vanished long ago. What both sites share besides their condition is worth marking. The object of veneration is present, physically, as a body. Where the Golden Order build cathedrals around an absence and the two fingers gesture in dim chambers, Dragon Communion keeps its god in the room, dead, and asks the faithful to eat it. What happens to the eater? The practice changes the person who takes it up, and the changes accumulate. Eyes go first. A practitioner who has consumed enough hearts develops draconic eyes, yellow with a vertical slit, replacing whatever color they had before. Players notice this happening to their own character partway through the process, usually without having been warned. Resistances shift. A communicant becomes markedly resistant to fire and markedly vulnerable to lightning, which is precisely the profile of a drake rather than of a human being. The body is being converted toward one kind of dragon and away from another, and the direction it moves in is the direction of Bayle's line, rather than the ancestors. And the transformations continue past what a person can walk back from. Some practitioners went far enough that they stopped being people. The magma worms found in caves and beneath the earth are, by one reading the game supports, communicants who took the practice all the way and arrived somewhere they could not return from. One version of Dragon Communion ends with a man acquiring a useful spell. There is another in which he ends up living in a cave under a mountain, no longer able to speak, and the difference between the two is a matter of how many hearts he ate. The older form. A detail buried in an item description reframes the whole practice, and it belongs here. What a tarnished does is the modern version. The ancient and original form of Dragon Communion involved feasting on rock hearts, and the outcome was transformation into an ancient dragon. Read the difference. The old rite made you one of the immortal ruling species. The current rite gives you a spell. Something in the practice degraded, and the degradation tracks the degradation of the material it works on. When the ancient dragons were plentiful and their hearts were available, Eating one made you an ancient dragon. Now the available hearts belong to drakes, the debased descendants of a traitor, and eating one makes you a person with yellow eyes and a fire breath. The practitioners at the Cathedral of Caelid are working the same rite their predecessors worked, on worse ingredients for smaller results, in a building nobody maintains. The drakes understand. The most unsettling thing about Dragon Communion is that its targets know about it. Exeeks the decaying stations himself at the entrance to the Cathedral of Dragon Communion. He is a drake. He has succumbed to the scarlet rot that covers Caelid, and he has kept his position anyway, in order to kill or turn back anyone approaching the altar. Take that in properly. A dragon has worked out where the hunters get their power, has gone to that place, and has stayed there, rotting, guarding the door. He is not defending anything of his own. There is nothing at that cathedral belonging to dragons except the practice of consuming them. Exeeks is standing outside a building where his species is processed, keeping people from going in, for as long as his body holds together. The old texts note that even after the rot took him, he never forgot his hatred. The man who refused. One figure in the lands between abstains from the practice on purpose, and his reasoning is the clearest warning anyone gives about it. Yura, hunter of bloody fingers, declines to consume dragon hearts. His stated concern is losing himself. He is not squeamish. Yura hunts murderers across the lands between and kills them, and he has no objection to violence or to dragons. What he objects to is what the hearts do to the eater over time, and he has evidently seen enough communicants to know where the road ends. His own story goes somewhere else and belongs to another account. What matters here is that the lands between contains a professional hunter who looked at Dragon Communion and decided the price was too high, and that his judgment is presented without irony. Everyone else eats. The other dragon religion. A distinction needs drawing here because two separate things get called dragon worship, and they came from opposite directions. Dragon communion is the hunting practice. Kill dragons, eat their hearts, take their power. It exists because a wounded king aimed it at an enemy's bloodline. The dragon cult is something else. It grew out of a peace rather than a war, made between the Golden Order and the dragons after the fighting stopped, and its priesthood included dragons themselves. Lanciac served as a priestess of it and communed with knights of the order. Its incantations use golden lightning rather than the red primeval kind, and its practitioners were sanctioned figures within the order rather than outsiders eating hearts in ruins. Both survive in the lands between today, and both are in decline, and a tarnished can learn from either. The cult story belongs to the war and the peace that followed it, which is the subject of the next two nights. Tonight the point is the contrast. One religion approached the dragons and was received. The other one eats them. What the incantations do. The spells themselves deserve a look, because they describe the arrangement more honestly than any doctrine could. Dragon Claw, Dragon Maw, Dragonfire. The names are unadorned and the effects match. The practitioner's arm becomes a dragon's claw and strikes, or a dragon's jaws close on whatever is in front of them, or fire comes out of a human throat. Look at the form these take. A Golden Order incantation calls down something external. Lightning from above, a blessing from the Erdtree, a rite performed on behalf of an authority. Dragon communion incantations do the opposite. Nothing is called down. The practitioner's own body briefly becomes the weapon, because the material for the transformation is already inside them, having been eaten. The more advanced ones follow the same logic further. Named dragons unlock named spells, and the correspondence is direct. Kill the particular dragon, consume that dragon, cast what that dragon could do, which makes the whole catalogue a record of deaths. Every incantation in the cathedral's list is a named creature that somebody killed and ate, and the spell exists because the creature does not. Why the Golden Order tolerated it? An obvious question sits under all of this, and the lands between never addresses it. The Golden Order regulates worship with considerable severity. It banned the study of the primeval current at Raya Lucaria. It wiped a candidate for godhood out of the record for holding the wrong flame. It hunted the frenzied flame's adherents and sealed their god under its own capital, as this channel covered elsewhere, and it left Dragon Communion alone. 2 churches, an active priesthood, incantations distributed to anyone who asks, and a practice that turns human beings into something other than human. The order that mutilated its own omen for carrying traits it disliked let this run. The most likely reason is the one that reflects worst on everybody. The Golden Order fought a war against the dragons, which is tomorrow night's subject. A practice that kills dragons and harvests them was aimed at the very enemy the Order was fighting. Placidusax built a weapon to use against Bayle. The Golden Order inherited a functioning anti-dragon apparatus with its own recruitment, its own reward structure, and its own religious motivation, and it cost them nothing to permit. Whether the Order understood where the practice came from is unrecorded. Whether it would have cared is not much of a question. The state it is in now. We close on the condition of the institution as a tarnished finds it, because the decline says something. The church on the island has 3 incantations available and a dead dragon on the floor. The cathedral in Caelid has the full catalogue and a rotting drake at the door trying to keep customers out. The grand altar near the jagged peak has a priestess in borrowed shape and a dead dragon large enough to have an altar carved from its corpse. No hierarchy connects them. No living authority administers the practice. There is no head of this religion anywhere in the lands between, no doctrine written down, and no instruction given to a new communicant beyond the mechanical fact that hearts go on the altar. It runs on nothing but the transaction. A person arrives with a heart, kneels, eats, and receives power. Nobody explains, nobody supervises, and nobody tells them what happens after the 5th heart or the 10th. The buildings are falling down and the rite still works, which is the most reliable summary of anything left over from the age before the Erdtree. What nobody involved knows. We close on the shape of the whole arrangement, because it is the strangest thing in this series so far. Dragon Communion has churches, altars, incantations, knights, a priesthood, and adherents scattered across the lands between and into the realm of shadow. It has run long enough for its buildings to collapse and its knights to be cast out, and nobody has ever closed it. And it is a weapon. Every heart eaten at every altar is a step in an operation ordered by a dragon who has withdrawn into his own weather against a traitor and a bloodline for an injury inflicted before the Erdtree was planted. Nobody performing the rite knows that. The priestess at the grand altar near the jagged peak knows part of it, and she is a dragon herself, in a borrowed shape. The banished knights outside the Caelid Cathedral do not. The tarnished kneeling on that island off Limgrave, barely out of the tutorial, certainly does not. They are all carrying out a very old instruction in a ruined building, on behalf of a king who has not spoken to anybody in an age, and the power they receive for it is real. Sleep well. Tomorrow the Erdtree arrives, and the dragons find out what has come for them. Leyndell has never fallen. That is the claim the Golden Order's capital rests on, and it is close to true. The royal capital has been besieged, assaulted, and approached by everything the lands between could produce, and its walls have held through all of it. Once, in recorded history, something came, and the walls did not hold, and the thing that did it was a dragon. Tonight we look at the war that followed. When it happened, the timing matters and the game is careful about it. This is not a conflict between the dragons at their height and the Erdtree at its founding. By the time the war begins, the age of plenty has ended. Marika the Eternal is on the throne, and Godfrey is Elden Lord. The Golden Order is established, functioning and confident, and the dragons are already diminished. Their capital has been crumbling since time immemorial. Their lord has gone up into the storm and stopped answering anybody. Their species split against itself in a civil war that never resolved, as this series covered 2 nights ago. So the war of the ancient dragons pits a young order at its peak against an old one that has been coming apart for an age, rather than 2 empires meeting at full strength, and the old one moves first, which raises a question the game does not answer. Why then? Why, after tolerating the Erdtree's rise through its entire early period, did the dragons attack? The available reading is that they had been watching the Golden Order's expansion and concluded that waiting was no longer an option. A species that had lost the capacity to act, which our opening night set out, found a circumstance urgent enough to override it. Grandsax. The dragon who came was called Grandsax, and he was immense even by the standards of his kind. He wielded a spear. That detail is unusual enough to sit with. A dragon carrying a weapon. A giant golden spear charged with lightning, rather than relying on the natural armaments his species was built with. He reached Leyndell, and he brought the walls down. The Knights of the Erdtree met him with an incantation the Order had developed for this problem in particular. Golden Lightning Fortification, a rite of Erdtree worship that shields the caster against red lightning. That the Order had such a thing at all indicates it had been anticipating dragons for some time. It was not enough at the walls. Grandsax got through and into the city proper, and the royal capital of the Golden Order had an ancient dragon inside it. He was killed there. The accounts vary on who struck the final blow, with Godfrey named in some tellings, and the outcome is the same. Grandsax died in Leyndell at the fortified manor, and the war he started outlived him by a long way. Search. The body that is still there. What happened to Grandsax afterward is the strangest monument in the lands between, and any player who has walked through Leyndell has climbed on it. His body is still in the city. A dead ancient dragon loses its colour and hardens into rock that will not be moved, and Grance's corpse did precisely that where it fell. It was too large to move and too solid to break down, so the Golden Order built around it. The immense, stone body lies between the fortified manor and the lower city, spanning streets, with buildings adjoining it. Citizens of Leyndell live in the shadow of it. Guards patrol past it. A weapon can be prized out of it, the bolt of Grandsax, the spear he came in with, still lodged where he dropped it. Consider what the Golden Order did with the one occasion its capital was breached. It left the evidence lying in the middle of the city, permanently, and carried on around it. Whether that is a trophy, a warning, or the practical outcome of a problem nobody could shift, the Order has never said. All three readings are available, and the stone does not care which one you pick. The Sentinels who became what they fought. The Order's response to the attack produced the most unsettling adaptation in this series, and it happened inside its own ranks. Tree Sentinels are the Golden Knights who guard the Erdtree's approaches, mounted, armoured, and among the most disciplined forces the Golden Order fields. After Grandsax came through the walls, a faction of them reached a conclusion. Real protection of the Erdtree, they decided, was to become dragons themselves. And they did it. The Draconic Tree. Sentinels are the result. Knights in malformed golden armor worked with dragon imagery, changed in ways the game describes as misshapen, wielding the Order's power in a body that has been altered toward the enemy's shape. Sit with the logic that produced them. An institution that mutilated its own people for showing traits it disapproved of, that criminalized the primordial life force its own tree grew from, permitted a body of its elite knights to deliberately transform themselves into the thing that had just breached its capital. The permission was granted because the transformation served the Erdtree. Everything in the Golden Order's doctrine bends around that one requirement, and it bends much further than the Order's public position on purity would suggest. The last battle. The war ran on after Grandsax fell, and it ended on the Altus Plateau, outside Leyndell's outer walls. The dragons came again in force. The Order met them with what it had, and what it had by that point included the demigods themselves, because the army was committed elsewhere, and there was nobody else left to put on the field. The dragon who stood out in that engagement was Fortissax, called the mightiest boulder stone of his kind, distinguished by an ability none of the others had. He could conjure 2 red lightning spears at once, rather than one. Against him came Godwyn the Golden, the first son of Marika and Godfrey. The accounts of that fight are unusually warm for a Golden Order record. Godwyn fought to the last. He was outmatched in raw terms, and he did not withdraw, and the phrase that survives about his conduct emphasizes courage rather than victory. He won. What he did next. And here is the moment this entire series has been building toward, because it is the only one of its kind in the lands between. Godwyn spared him. Having defeated the mightiest of the ancient dragons in the final battle of a war the dragons had started, in front of the Golden Order's assembled demigods, the Order's first son did not take the kill. He befriended his fallen foe. That act ended the war. Not a treaty negotiated by envoys, not an unconditional surrender, not the extermination that the Golden Order's usual practice would suggest. One young man decided that the creature in front of him deserved something other than death, and the fighting stopped. What followed was integration rather than conquest. The dragons who survived were brought into the capital's religious life instead of being hunted out of it, and a second faith took root inside Leyndell alongside the worship of the Erdtree. Several ancient dragons went further and assumed feeble human forms in order to commune with people. Leyndell, Fortissax's own sister, took that shape and served the new cult as a priestess. That is the peace Godwyn made. Tomorrow follows what that cost him, and what became of the dragon who accepted it. Why the Order allowed it. One practical question deserves answering before we close, because the Golden Order's tolerance here sits oddly against everything else it did. The stated reason is theological, and it is almost absurdly convenient. Worship of the ancient dragons does not conflict with faith in the Erdtree, because the dragon's lightning is imbued with gold. That is the whole justification. The colour changed, and a colour change was sufficient to make an enemy religion acceptable inside the capital. The red lightning of the Old Age, primeval and older than the Erdtree, becomes golden lightning once the dragons are inside the Order, and golden lightning is the Erdtree's own. So the cult is permitted, its incantations are taught to knights, and a dragon in human shape holds a priestess's position in Leyndell. Whether the lightning changed in fact, or whether the Order merely redescribed it, is a question nobody in the lands between appears to have asked. What the Order learned to do. The war changed the Golden Order's armory permanently, and the changes are visible to any player who fights through Leyndell. Golden Lightning fortification was the first response. A shielding rite tuned against red lightning. But the Order went further than defense, and what it built afterward is the interesting part. The capital's knights acquired lightning of their own, not the primeval red kind, which belongs to the Old Age, and to nobody the Order could recruit, but golden lightning cast through Erdtree incantations. Lightning spears, bolts called down on a point of impact, an entire branch of the Order's holy magic that did not exist before a dragon put its walls on the ground, which means the Golden Order's most recognizable offensive faith was learned from an enemy during a war that enemy started. The Order presents these incantations as gifts of the Erdtree. Their form, their function, and their timing all point somewhere else. What the dragons lost by winning nothing. The outcome is usually described as a peace, and from the dragon's side, it deserves blunter language than that. They started it, they lost it, and the terms were assimilation. Nobody drove them out and nobody exterminated them. They were brought inside, given a cult, a place in the capital's religious life, and a role teaching incantations to the Order's knights. Several of them took human shape in order to make the arrangement work. Weigh what that requires of a species that ruled this world. An ancient dragon in Leyndell, wearing a feeble human form so that people can talk to it, teaching the Order's soldiers to wield a golden version of its own lightning, is a long way from the wall of living rock around a sleeping king. Their god had already left them. Their lord had stopped answering. Their own kind had split in a civil war nobody won, and the resolution offered to the survivors was to become priests of a religion administered by the people who had beaten them. Most of them took it, some did not, and the ones who did not are the drakes and the rotting things a tarnished kills in the fields, unaffiliated with anything, hunted by an institution that eats their hearts. What the stone remembers. We close on the physical evidence, because the lands between keeps its history in objects rather than in books. Grandsax lies in Leyndell, spanning the streets, his spear still lodged in him. The draconic tree sentinels patrol in armor shaped like the enemy they were made to fight, and their design records a decision the Order has never explained. Fortissax has a grave, and what is in it belongs to tomorrow night. Ancient dragons in feeble human forms walk the lands between, one of them still roaming the Altus Plateau, where the last battle was fought, casting the red lightning of an age nobody remembers. And in the sky, above all of it, a crumbling city goes on falling apart, with a king inside who was not consulted about any of this and would not have come down if he had been. That is what the war of the ancient dragons left behind. A body in the street, knights wearing the shape of what they killed. A religion built on one man's decision to spare somebody, and a species that ended up teaching its own power to the people who took its world. Sleep well. Tomorrow we look at the friendship, and at what became of it after Godwyn died. Last night ended with a young man choosing not to kill something, and a war ending because of it. Tonight we follow what that decision produced, across an age, to its conclusion. And the conclusion is the bleakest thing in this series. What they had. The record is thin about the friendship itself, and what survives of it is worth stating before the rest. Godwyn the Golden was Marika's eldest, born to her and to Godfrey, and the accounts describe him as beloved in a way that no other demigod in the lands between quite matches. Fortissax carried the title of mightiest boulderstone among his kind, and he was the one Godwyn had faced at the end of the war. After the war, they were companions. The word the game uses is friendship, and it uses it more than once, in monuments and in item descriptions written by people with no reason to be sentimental about a dragon. Whatever passed between them across the years that followed, the lands between does not preserve. There are no conversations recorded, no scenes, no accounts of what a demigod and an ancient dragon did with each other's company. What is preserved is what Fortissax did afterward, and that is the only testimony the friendship needs. The wrong kind of death. Then came the night of the Black Knives, and Godwyn was killed in a manner nobody in the world had a category for. Assassins came for him with blades carrying a stolen fragment of destined death, and what those blades did was kill his soul and leave his body alive. That is the reverse of every death that has ever happened. Under the Golden Order's arrangement, a body dies and the soul returns to the Erdtree to be gathered and reborn. Godwyn's soul was destroyed outright, and his flesh, having never died, could not follow it anywhere. He was buried anyway. His body was interred beneath Leyndell, at the base of the Erdtree's roots, in the deep place a tarnished reaches much later, and it kept going. Godwyn's soulless body grew. It swelled past any human dimension, developing a scaled fishtail, spreading through the deep-root depths, and what it touched, it contaminated. The roots of the great tree took on deathroot from his burial, and out of that contamination came those who live in death. The people the Golden Order would spend the following age hunting. He is called the Prince of Death now. His face appears on things, in places the deathroot reached, growing on crabs in tainted water and on rocks in ruined villages. What was the most beloved son of the Golden Order is now a spreading condition with a name. The space inside him. There is a place inside that body, and this is where the story goes somewhere no other story in the lands between goes. It is called the Deathbed Dream, an enclosed space within Godwyn, a version of the throne his corpse occupies, existing inside him rather than around him. Nobody built it, and nothing explains its existence except the condition Godwyn is in. A body with no soul, still living, still growing, contains a space where whatever is happening to him is happening. The death is in there. The thing the Black Knives put into him has never sat inert in his flesh. It is active in that interior place, doing to him whatever it has been doing for an age. A tarnished can enter the deathbed dream, late in a long quest line, after obtaining a curse mark of death and giving it to a woman who lies beside corpses. And when they get in there, they find that somebody arrived first. What Fortissax did. Fortissax went in after him. An ancient dragon, one of the last of the immortal ruling species of the age before the Erdtree, entered the interior of his friend's undying corpse in order to fight the death that was consuming him. Nobody asked him to. The Golden Order had put Godwyn in the ground and turned to other business. Marika had done whatever Marika did about her son and told nobody. The capital's ancient dragon cult, which existed because of this friendship, does not appear to have been involved. One dragon decided that the thing inside his friend could be fought and went in and started fighting it. Sit with the shape of that act. Godwyn spared Fortissax's life at the close of a war his own side had lost. Fortissax repaid it by climbing into a corpse to wrestle with a fragment of destined death on his friend's behalf, in a place with no exit, for as long as it took. How long and how it went. The record on this is short, and it does not soften anything. Fortissax fought long and hard against the death within its companion. Victory was never achieved, and the only reward was corruption. That is the entire account. An unmeasurable span of struggle, no result, and the struggle itself doing to Fortissax what it had been doing to Godwyn. He became a lich dragon. The corruption took him by degrees rather than at once, and the evidence of it is visible on his body when a tarnished at last reaches him. Scales torn away, death blight infecting the wounds where they came off. A creature that could summon twin red lightning stakes, now producing storms of gold and black lightning that carry death blight in them, because the thing he came in to fight has been rewriting what he is, and he is weak. Players note this and complain about it. The fight is easier than a legend boss of that stature should be. The reason is in the lore rather than in the design. By the time anyone arrives, Fortissax is barely holding on. He has been at war inside that corpse for an age, losing the entire time. And what a tarnished walks in on is the end of a very long defeat. What the player is doing. Now the part that sits badly, and it should, the tarnished kills him, not in self-defense, and not to save anybody. The fight happens because a woman named Fear needs Fortissax out of the way in order to lie with Godwyn and gestate a rune, and the tarnished has agreed to help her. Fortissax is defending his friend. That is what he has been doing the entire time, and it is what he is doing when the player walks in and the player removes him. Whether Fear's project is good is a separate question, and the game presents it seriously. The mending rune of the Death Prince would restore death to a world that had it stolen, and free those who live in death from a curse the Golden Order inflicted on them. There is a real argument for it. The price is that somebody has to finish off the last thing standing between Godwyn and whatever comes next, and the last thing is a dying dragon who has spent an age refusing to leave. The sister, a further figure, belongs here, because her situation is the quietest cruelty in this account. Lanciax is Fortissax's sister. She survived the war, took human form as the cult's priestess in Leyndell, taught incantations to the Order's knights, and by every indication built a life inside the arrangement her brother's defeat had produced. She is still out there. A tarnished can meet her on the plateau, in the country where her brother made his name, throwing spears of primeval lightning at strangers. Nothing in the game indicates that she knows what happened to him. Her brother is inside a corpse under the capital, losing a war nobody witnessed, turning into something that carries death in its lightning. And she is on the surface, in a borrowed shape, in the country where he won his reputation, doing what she has done since the peace. If she knows, she has no way to reach him. If she does not, then the last ancient dragon still living openly in the lands between is unaware that her brother has been dying by inches for an age. What the cult became without him. The religion that Godwyn's mercy founded outlived both parties to it, and what happened to it afterward deserves noting. The ancient dragon cult in Leyndell existed because of a friendship between a demigod and a dragon. Once the demigod was buried under the capital and the dragon had gone into the corpse after him, the institution kept running with neither of its founders present. Knights continued to learn its incantations. Its priestess continued to teach them. The golden lightning that entered the Order's armory through this arrangement is still in use across the lands between at the time a tarnished arrives. And nobody at the top of it knows what happened to the two figures the whole thing rests on. That pattern has recurred across this entire series. A god departs and a lord waits. A king issues an order, and the institution executing it forgets who issued it. A cult goes on functioning while its founders are buried, corrupted, and unaccounted for. The lands between is full of arrangements that outlive the reasons for them, and this one is the tenderest example. Bayle. Vike. A single knight of that cult deserves his own mention, because his story is the last thing the friendship produced, and it went badly. Vike was a knight of the capital's ancient dragon cult, taught by Lanciax herself, and among all the knights she trained, the accounts say she loved him most. He was a contender for Elden Lord. That places him among a small number of tarnished who came close to the throne, and by every indication, he was the closest anyone got before the events of the game. He did not make it. What became of Vike is a matter for another series on this channel. He went down into the shunning grounds, took the frenzied flame, and what returned from that chamber is no longer a person anyone can speak with. Set his fate beside the arrangement he belonged to. The ancient dragon cult produced one champion who might have taken the throne and mended the world, and he ended up burning in a sealed chamber under the capital. And Lanciax, who taught him, is still on the plateau. The reading that will not settle. Before we close, an interpretation that the community has argued about since release, flagged as speculation rather than fact. Some players have proposed that Fear and Fortissax are the same being, that the dragon took human form, as several ancient dragons did, and lived beside Godwyn as a woman, and that the lich dragon encountered inside the deathbed dream is a manifestation of what she could not save, rather than a separate creature. The evidence offered is circumstantial. ancient dragons demonstrably took human shape. Fear's entire existence orbits Godwyn. The Lich Dragon appears in a dream space that Fear's questline opens. The evidence against is that the game never says it, and that Fear and Fortissax are treated throughout as distinct. This account does not endorse the theory. It is worth mentioning because of what its popularity indicates. Players looking at this story reach for an explanation that makes the loyalty even more total than the text already makes it, which suggests the text has already landed. What the Mercy bought. We close on the arithmetic of that decision from the previous night, because it is worth being exact about what it produced. Godwyn spared a defeated enemy. That act ended a war, integrated a species into the capital, founded a religion, and gave the Golden Order a body of incantations it still uses. It also acquired him a friend who, when the worst thing in the setting happened to him, went into his corpse and fought for him until it destroyed him. There is no comparable loyalty anywhere in the lands between, not among the demigods who spent the shattering killing each other, not in the Golden Order which buried Godwyn and moved on to the business of hunting the things his burial produced, not from his mother, who is not recorded as having done anything about any of it. One dragon, whose species Godwyn's family had beaten in a war, is the only figure in the entire world who tried. Sleep well. Tomorrow follows the rest of them, and what the lands between made of what was left. 6 nights have covered kings, traitors, wars, and one friendship. Tonight we look at the ordinary population. The dragons are tarnished meats in practice, in fields and lakes and caves, killed by the 100 by people who never learn what they were. Because the great figures of this story are almost all gone. What remains is a species in its final condition, scattered across a world that has stopped thinking about it, and the condition is worse than a defeat. What a modern dragon is. Start with the physical difference, because it is visible at a glance once you know to look. An ancient dragon has 4 legs and a separate pair of wings on his back. That is the old body, a creature built to walk and to fly independently, gold inside immortal. A modern dragon has back legs only. Its wings occupy the position where forelimbs would be. It cannot do both things at once in the way the old ones could, and its frame is smaller, and there is no gold in it. More importantly, the modern ones cannot control the draconic lightning. That capacity belonged to the ancient dragons, and it did not carry down. What a tarnished faces in Limgrave or Liurnia breathes fire, or frost, or rot, and none of it is the primeval red lightning that brought Leyndell's walls down. They are the same species in the way a candle is the same thing as a house fire. Grail. One creature stands at the head of the modern population, and her state is the whole story in one image. Grail lies in Caelid, in the open, surrounded by her offspring. She is enormous, larger than anything else a tarnished meets in the early game, and she is the mother of the mortal dragons. Agil, Azula, Smaragd, and the rest descend from her. She does not move. Grail is alive and prone, unable to rise, with her children arranged around her. Killing her is among the easiest large encounters in the game, and it grants an enormous number of runes, and there is no fight in any meaningful sense. Set that beside the closing image of our opening night. Up in Farum Azula, a ring of dragons chose to become stone so that their king could rest inside it. The ancient dragons surrounded their sleeping king as a fortification, awake by choice for an age. Grail's brood surround their mother because she cannot get up, and a stranger kills all of them in an afternoon. Where they live now, the distribution of dragons across the lands, between records a defeat more precisely than any chronicle would. They are in lakes. In Limgrave, a dragon sits in shallow water in the first hour of the game, and a new tarnished with a starting weapon can kill it. They are in ruins. Dragons occupy the broken places of other people's civilizations, roosting in what somebody else built and abandoned. They are underground, in caves, in the forms called magma worms, and this series covered where some of those came from 2 nights ago. They are in Caelid, rotting, because the scarlet rot took that region, and the dragons in it were not exempt. What they do not have is territory. No dragon in the lands between holds anything, defends any border, or rules over any subject population. The species that owned this world before the Erdtree occupies the gaps between other people's holdings. The ones who kept their shape. A small number of ancient dragons survived into the present, and their situations are worth listing because each one is a different kind of ending. Placidusax sits in his storm outside the world, holding a post over nothing. Fortissax is somewhere under Leyndell, inside a body that should have died, and losing. Bayle is in a crater on the far side of a sealed realm, eating his own line. Lanciax roams the Altus Plateau in a borrowed human shape, casting the old lightning, teaching nobody now that her pupil is gone. Senesax is on the jagged peak, having chosen the traitor's side in a civil war that ended before the Erdtree was planted, still on that mountain. And a handful of others exist as bodies. The dragon on the floor of the church off Limgrave, the corpse carved into an altar near the jagged peak, the ones half set into the rock of Farum Azula, greying as they crumble. That is the surviving role of that species in the present age. 5 living individuals in identifiable states, one of them a traitor, one of them dying inside somebody else, and none of them in contact with any of the others. The hunt continues. The most active thing anyone in the lands between does about dragons now is kill them for parts, and the apparatus for that has been described in full on this channel already. What deserves stating here is the scale. A tarnished playing through the game will kill more dragons than the Golden Order's entire war against the ancient dragons is recorded as having killed. Not because the tarnished is stronger than the armies of Leyndell, but because the dragons available now put up nothing comparable to what Grandsax and Fortissax put up. The war was an event. The current arrangement is harvesting. Dragon hunters roam. Dragon communion runs its altars. Knights of a banished order guard a ruined cathedral where the hearts are exchanged. And drakes go on being killed across every region of the map by anybody who needs a heart or happens to be passing. Nobody calls this a war because a war requires 2 sides. The Draconians. One more population belongs in this account, and it is the strangest legacy of the peace Godwyn made. Several ancient dragons took human form. That is established, and Lanciax is the clearest case, and some of them interbred with humans. The result is a people called Draconians, short-lived, human in most respects, carrying enough of the old bloodline to be distinguishable. A player can even begin the game as one, and the class exists in the character creator without much explanation attached. Sit with what that represents. a deathless people who once held this world, having lost a war and taken the terms offered, produce descendants who are mortal, short-lived, and walking around the lands between as ordinary people. Some of the blood of the creatures that held this world is in the general population now, diluted past recognition, in bodies that die of age. What they are used for. A grim inventory belongs here, because the lands between converts dragons into goods with unusual thoroughness. Their hearts become incantations as the fourth night set out. Their scales become materials. Dragon scale flesh, smithing components, and in the Dragon Lord's case, a substance that can make a weapon capable of killing a god. Their bones and teeth turn up in equipment. Their bodies become terrain. An altar carved from a corpse. A church built around one. A street in a capital running along a stone flank. And their name is used. Dragon Communion, Dragon Cult, Draconic Tree Sentinels, Dragonkin. Institutions across the lands between carry the word in their titles, while the creatures themselves lie in lakes. The clearest measure of what happened to this species is that no part of it went unused. A civilization ended and its remains were distributed across the economy of the one that followed. The Dragonkin soldiers. One category of creature deserves separating out because nobody knows what it is. Dragonkin soldiers are found in the underground places, in Noxtella, in the Lake of Rot, in the deep chambers beneath the lands between. They are humanoid, dragon-headed, armoured, and armed with weapons of lightning. They are not dragons, and they are not people, and the game does not say where they came from. The available readings point in incompatible directions. Some have proposed they are the Eternal City's own creations, built by the Nox for purposes that ended with the Nox. Others have suggested they are what happens when Dragon Communion is taken further than the magma worms, in a different direction. Others read them as an entirely separate lineage that has nothing to do with either. What can be said is where they are found. Everything about them sits underground, in the buried civilizations that the Golden Order destroyed, or that destroyed themselves, and their lightning is the primeval red kind, rather than the Order's gold. They belong to the world before, and they are down there with everything else that does. The ones who went rotten. Caelid deserves a final note, because what happened to the dragons there is a second catastrophe layered onto the first. When the rot came for Caelid, it spared nothing, and the dragons living there went down with the rest of it. Exix, who appeared earlier in this account, guarding a cathedral door, is the clearest case. A drake with the rot in him, decaying, still functioning. A rotting dragon is an image the lands between produces without comment, and it deserves one. This species survived the loss of its god, the withdrawal of its king, a civil war, a defeat, an assimilation, and an age of being hunted for parts. And then an entirely unrelated disaster arrived in the region some of them were living in, and took them too. Nothing in Caelid's catastrophe has anything to do with dragons. Millennia bloomed there in a fight with her brother, as this channel covered elsewhere, and the region died. The dragons happened to be standing in it. That is the last indignity available to a fallen species, to be destroyed a second time by something that was not aiming at you. The thing that never happened. We close on an absence because it is the loudest fact about the dragons in the present age. Nothing has come for them. There was no final campaign, no extermination order, No moment where the Golden Order decided the dragon question was settled and closed the file. The war ended with a friendship, the survivors were absorbed, and after that the species kept declining without anyone having to decide anything. Their god left and nobody replaced it. Their lord withdrew and nobody deposed him. Their capital fell apart on its own schedule. Their strongest members went into private catastrophes one at a time. Their descendants lost the lightning, then the size, then the gold, then the territory. And the institution built to harvest them was aimed at them by one of their own. There is no villain in the dragon's decline. That is what makes it the bleakest arc in the lands between. Everything that happened to them was either self-inflicted, administrative, or the slow arithmetic of an immortal species that stopped being able to want things. Sleep well. Tomorrow, the last night, and the question of whether any of this is over. 7 nights ago, this account began with a claim that the lands between had an owner before the Erdtree, and that what remains of that owner is either underground, coming apart, or parked in bad weather with nothing to do. We have walked through all of it. Tonight we ask what it adds up to, and whether that first age has ended at all. The pattern that repeats. Start with the thing this series has been circling since the first night, because it is the reason the dragons matter beyond their own story. A god departs. A servant remains at the post. The arrangement continues without the authority it was built to serve. Placidusax is the clearest case. His god departed. He took himself out of the world, and the office he still holds has had no territory attached to it for an age. The Golden Order is the larger case. Another series on this channel established that its own channel of communication went dark long before the Order reached its height, and that the fingers kept issuing instructions on nothing while an entire civilization obeyed them. Set the two side by side, and the arrangement is identical in structure and different in scale. One dragon in a storm, holding a post, a whole world below him, doing the same thing without knowing it, which raises a question that neither series can settle. A dragon held this office under a deity that walked out on him. A queen was raised to godhood by a power whose line of communication had already gone dead. If both arrangements ran the same way and failed the same way, then this world has run 2 consecutive orders that outlived the authority behind them, and nobody in the world has noticed either one. Whether the dragons were the first. There is a further question underneath that, and the game gestures at it without answering. Placidusax was the earliest known Elden Lord. The word doing the work in that sentence is known. Nothing establishes that his was the first age. His capital had been crumbling since time immemorial by the reckoning of people who came much later, and the meteor that may have struck it is undated, and the beastman's catacombs go down further than anyone has mapped. If the dragons ruled after somebody else, then the pattern this series has described runs deeper than 2 iterations. A world that installs an order, watches its god withdraw, and grinds on under the machinery until a new order arrives to do the same thing, is a world with a mechanism rather than a history. Nothing confirms this. It is worth stating as a possibility, because the alternative requires believing that the dragons were the beginning, and nothing in the lands between has ever been the beginning of anything. What ended them? The 7th night ended by noting that the dragon's decline has no villain, and that deserves finishing properly. Take the causes in order. Their God left, and nothing in the record blames anyone for that. Their Lord withdrew rather than adapting, which was his own decision. Their strongest member betrayed the arrangement and maimed the king, which was Bayle's decision. The civil war that followed was never resolved, because both leaders were wrecked at once. The Erdtree rose during that paralysis, and the dragons attacked it and lost. Then the survivors accepted assimilation, which was also a choice, made by dragons who had run out of alternatives. And after that, nothing was done to them at all. They declined. Their descendants lost the lightning, the gold, the size, the territory. The institution harvesting them was aimed by one of their own. The rot that finished some of them was aimed at nobody. At every stage there is a decision or an accident, and at no stage is there an enemy who set out to end them, which makes this the only major arc in the lands between, where the catastrophe cannot be blamed on the Golden Order. The Order fought them, won, and absorbed them, and the species was already coming apart before the Erdtree was planted. The ones still holding. Before we close, the role of what is still going on out there, because every one of these is a post being held for a reason that expired. A king above the clouds, who nobody removed and nobody killed, still occupying an office in a place the calendar does not reach. A dragon inside the body of a demigod, on the losing end of something he volunteered for, fighting on behalf of a person who has no way of knowing he is there. An exile in a mountain crater beyond a sealed border, feeding on his own line, with a pair of stolen heads still fixed to his throat. A priestess in the wrong body, on a plateau where her brother made his reputation, throwing red lightning at strangers and instructing a faith with no leadership left. Beastmen keeping watch over a tomb in a capital that has been dropping out of the sky for more generations than anybody counted, on behalf of a religion whose object stopped attending. Golden knights riding in the silhouette of a creature their predecessors killed, carrying out a resolution nobody has looked at again since the day the walls fell. And 3 altars in 3 ruins, unstaffed, functioning perfectly, executing an instruction older than the tree the world is named for. 6 arrangements, all functional, none of them connected to a living authority. What the Tarnished does to all of it. The player's role in this story deserves stating plainly, because it is less heroic than any of the game's other threads. A Tarnished kills dragons for parts across the whole map. They complete Placidusax's revenge by killing Bayle, without knowing they are completing anything. They finish Fortissax on behalf of a woman with her own project. They kill Placidusax himself if they find the rift and receive an upgrade for it. They eat hearts at ruined altars until their eyes change colour. None of this is malicious, and almost none of it is informed. The Tarnished has no quarrel with dragons and no idea what they were. They are obstacles, materials, and optional bosses, which is, in the end, the most honest thing about the arrangement. Leyndell went to war with these creatures and put up monuments about it afterward. The Tarnished dismantles what remains of them without ceremony, in passing, on the way to something else. That is what a fallen civilization looks like from the outside once enough time has passed. Not an enemy, not a tragedy, a source of crafting materials in the middle distance. The question in the title. So is the age before the Erdtree over? By every ordinary measure, yes. The dragons do not rule. Their capital is coming apart. Their species is reduced to hunted stock and 5 identifiable survivors, none of whom holds anything. And by the measure this series has been building, no. Their lord has not abdicated, been deposed, or died. Their capital has not fallen. It is falling slowly, and has been for longer than anyone can date. Their religion still runs at 3 altars. Their lightning is in the hands of the Order's own knights. Their blood is in the general population. And their king holds the title of Elden Lord in a place where time does not proceed, which means that in the only frame of reference that applies to him, he has not stopped being it. The Golden Order never ended the age before the Erdtree. It grew over the top of it, the way the Erdtree's own roots grew down through everything that was already there. Good night. High above the lands between, in a scrap of broken sky that cannot be seen from below, there is a flat expanse under moving cloud, ringed by storm. An old creature sits in the middle of it. He has 2 heads where he once had 5, and the gold has gone out of everything except his belly, and his scales have the property of making weapons able to kill gods. He was Elden Lord when the world had a different shape. His god left without explanation, and he did not seek another. His subjects turned themselves to stone around him. His strongest servant took his heads and fled to a mountain. His capital began falling and has not stopped, and an age passed below him. A tree was planted, a queen was crowned, a ring was shattered, and a war consumed everything, and the survivors are still fighting over the pieces. None of it reached him. He is still there tonight, in weather of his own, watching an empty sky with both remaining heads, waiting for something that has never once indicated it is coming back. Good night, my friend.